All right, welcome back. In Module 6, we covered risk management. We identified things that could go wrong with your project, and we planned how to respond. Today, we're going to shift our focus to something that's equally important, and that's understanding the resources that your project actually needs to succeed. This module is going to prepare you for component 5 of your project plan. But let's start by connecting what we've covered to where we're going to next. So by now, you should have drafted your 4 components of your project. You've defined your project and you've identified your stakeholders. You've drawn clear scope boundaries, what's in and what's out. You've broken down the work into deliverables, and you've also created a timeline. On top of that, you've identified your top risks and your mitigation strategies. And now it's time to ask, what resources does your project actually need? And by that, I mean what people, what equipment, what materials, and what external services are going to be required to make your plan a reality. Component 5 isn't about calculating detailed budgets, and we've been clear about that from the very beginning. It's about describing your resource requirements clearly and specifically. Think of this as answering the question, if I handed this plan over to a sponsor, would they know exactly what resources to approve? Component 5 is between 1.5 and 2 pages describing your project resources. So what this means is that you're identifying the people and the roles that your project needs. It means specifying the equipment, the materials, the space that your project requires. It means noting any external services you'll need to get the project done, like, for example, consultants, contractors, and other specialized expertise. And remember, you're not calculating the costs here. You're just describing the requirements. Today's module gives you the framework to think about your resources strategically. We're going to start by watching a short, but it's a pretty powerful video by Adriana Girdler about the RACI matrix. It's only about 5 minutes long, but it's going to help you think about the roles and responsibilities related to your project. So RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And Adriana is going to explain how this pretty simple tool clarifies who does what on a project. So as you watch the video, pay attention to how she differentiates between being responsible for doing the work and being accountable for ensuring that it gets done. That's an important distinction, and it means a lot when you're planning your resources. Also, notice how she emphasizes having only one person responsible for each task. This is going to help you prevent the problem where everyone thinks that someone else is doing the work. So let's take a look. The video is linked down below. Now that you've seen how RACI works, I want you to think about your specific project and component 5 of your project plan. First, look back at your work breakdown structure from component 3. For each major deliverable in your WBS, who needs to be involved? Who's responsible for actually doing that work? And who's accountable for making sure it gets done? Second, think beyond just the people themselves. What equipment and resources does your project require? Is it access to a test server or a fulfillment system? Is it new hardware or software or a physical space like a storage room or a training facility? And third, consider external services. Do you need a contractor or a consultant, maybe a graphic designer or a security audit, or an external trainer. These are all resources too. And finally, think about how you'll describe all of this clearly. You don't just want to say adequate staffing, but you want to be a bit more specific, like a part-time project manager for 3 months, or 2 developers full-time for 2 months, and so on. This is the level of specificity that you need to make a resource plan that's actionable. But remember, for your project plan, it is okay to make intelligent assumptions about these things. I'd like you to find a quiet spot to reflect on this. Take around 10 minutes to write in your journal. At the top of the page, start with a fresh page, and as always, write today's date, the module number, and then write my approach to identifying project resources. So I want you to think about your specific project. What resources do you need? Don't identify them here, but think about how you'll go about identifying the people, the equipment, the materials, and the services that your project requires. How are you going to connect those resources to the work breakdown structure? How will you be sure that you haven't missed anything that's critical to your project's success? This isn't about drafting component 5 yet. It's about developing your strategic approach to resource thinking. Take a moment with this and give it some time before you start writing. All right, welcome back. I want to spend a moment now talking about how component 5 integrates with everything else that you've built. Your resources should connect directly to your work breakdown structure. For each work package in your WBS, you should be able to identify who's responsible for delivering it. If you can't make that connection yet, then you need to figure out why, because that means you're still missing something. And your resources should align with your timeline. When do you need each person or each piece of equipment? And your resources should also address your risks. If one of your risks is, say, a key technical expert might not be available, then your resource plan should show how you would mitigate that. Maybe by identifying a backup resource or building in time for a knowledge transfer. This is what integration means. Component 5 doesn't stand on its own. It connects to and it supports everything else in your plan. Like we've spoken about before, as you develop each component, you may need to revisit the other components and make some adjustments. Remember, this isn't a strictly linear process. Developing a project plan requires going back and forth, making sure that all the components are properly aligned and that they work together. There are a couple more videos by Adriana that I've linked below. One is on communication planning and the other on running project team meetings. They give you context about project coordination and how teams work together, and they'll deepen your understanding of project management in general. Now, I'm not going to ask you to reflect on them in your journals here today, but they are worth viewing. But for component 5 specifically, what you really need to focus on is the RACI thinking that we've just covered. The communication and meeting videos give you the bigger picture, but they're not required for your resource description. Watch them to get a fuller understanding of project planning. But if you're focused on completing your project plan efficiently, the RACI videos plus today's reflections are all that you really need to do that. All right, so now let me tell you what's coming up next. Module 8 is going to be our final teaching module, and it focuses on integration and your executive summary. It's about how you'll put all 5 components together into one coherent plan, and how you'll write an executive summary that captures the essence of your thinking. After this, you'll have independent work sessions. These are your time to complete component 5. Integrate all of your components, write your executive summary, and polish everything for final submission. You'll find the deadline in the syllabus. That's when you'll bring in your completed project plan along with your completed journal and take your final exam. Now you have everything that you need to complete component 5. In fact, you have everything that you need to get all 5 components into a draft form. And this prepares you for the final push. Think about this. You've been building something substantial over these past weeks. Now you'll add in the resource component and integrate everything into a complete, coherent plan. We have just one more module to go, and then the independent work begins. I'll see you in Module 8.